परम करुणा पौदुई जनानिताय गौरचंद्र सब अवतार सार शिरोमणि केवल आनंद कंद केवल आनंद कंद केवल आनंद कंद भजो भजो भाई चैतन्य निताई सुदृढ़ विश्वास कोरी विषय छाड़िया से रसे माझिया मुखे बोलो हरि हरि मुखे बोलो हरि हरि मुखे बोलो हरि हरि देखो ओरे भाई त्रिभुवने नाही ए मोन दयाल दाता पशु पाखी झूरे पाषाण विदरे शुनि जार गुण गाथा शुनि जार गुण गाथा शुनि जार गुण गाथा संसारे माझिया रोहिले पोडिया से पदे नहिल आश आपन करम बुंजाए शमन कहे लोचन दास कहे लोचन दास कहे लोचन दास
the topic we have is related to the glory of Srimad Bhagavatam. So we'll begin with prayers to the Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudirayen Nashtaprayeshva Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Ruttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. So I have actually two subparts to our discussion today. Our first part of discussion is about, as I had mentioned in the mail, something based on Jiva Goswami's own essay in TattvaSandarbha, where he, glorifies Srimad Bhagavatam as the topmost scripture. So we'll be seeing that briefly. And then we will move on to another essay by Suhotra Swami, which is based on some commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, etc. Where he basically glorifies Srimad Bhagavatam as the form of Krishna. Mataji, among Jiva Goswami's several writings, his Shad Sandarbha is very, very famous as the, as his commentary to Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's basically a commentary to Srimad Bhagavatam. But the difference is that it is organized thematically. That means, like, for example, Prabhupada's purport to Srimad Bhagavatam is text-wise, correct? So like that also he has written one another commentary. That is called as Krama Sandarbha. Krama Sandarbha means line by line. In Sanskrit, Krama, step by step, line by line. In fact, it is said that Prabhupada's Bhagavatam derives mostly from Jiva Goswami's Bhagavatam. Krama Sandarbha. That's what Prabhupada has most quoted. But besides his Krama Sandarbha, he wrote this Shad Sandarbha. So Sandarbha basically means, in Sanskrit, it means stringing together. That means getting key ideas and points and stringing it together, to make a connection. So basically what he has done is, in the Shad Sandarbha, in the first Sandarbha, which is called as TattvaSandarbha, he basically proves the greatness of Bhagavatam. He proves it really very, very technically and in a very sound fashion. In fact, I am going to quote only the simplest possible things in that. Anybody has written anything, because I myself did not understand, honestly, what is being said. So, but some very simple things which, we can understand. So don't worry. In fact, when I saw the topic, some people got afraid. They said, "Kya bolne wale ho?" So don't worry. Even I didn't understand anything which was very difficult in that. So, the first Sandarbha, Tattva Sandarbha, he basically proves the greatness. And in the second, third and fourth Sandarbha, the second is called Bhagavat Sandarbha, where he proves the position of Bhagavan, who is Bhagavan and how Bhagavan is supreme, So basically what he will do is he'll take all quotes from Bhagavatam only and he'll put it together and he will explain. And he will quote like Sridhara Swami and, all Acharyas and other Upanishads, Puranas profusely, It is like we have essence of Bhagavad Gita, na? So essence of Bhagavad Gita means it's not like verse by verse purport of Bhagavad Gita, but topics from Bhagavad Gita are taken and put under categories. So like this he has done. So Bhagavad Sandarbha basically proves that the superiority of Bhagavan. Then Paramatma Sandarbha. He talks there about Paramatma and his role and the Jivatma's role and how he comes to this world and all that philosophy part. Then the fourth one, Krishna Sandarbha. He talks about how Krishna is the greatest, Supreme Ishvara Parama Krishna, from the Bhagavatam again. So basically the second, third and fourth are all in the category of Sambandha Gyan, because they are talking about Sambandha. Like we have Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana. So Sambandha means who are we, who is Krishna, what is our relationship with Krishna. It is established in Bhagavat, Paramatma and Krishna Sandarbhas. The fifth Sandarbha he calls as Bhakti Sandarbha. Bhakti Sandarbha is Abhideya, where he shows what is Bhakti and the greatness of Bhakti over all other processes. Again from Bhagavatam. And the sixth one is called Preeti Sandarbha, which is nothing but Prayojana. That means the ultimate goal of Bhakti, which is love of Godhead. So that is Preeti Sandarbha. So in this way there is a Shada Sandarbha, which is thematically organized. So the first Sandarbha is about, the position of the book, Srimad Bhagavatam. Second, third, fourth are Sambandha Jnana, Bhagavat, Paramatma, Krishna. Fifth is Bhakti Sandarbha, which is Abhideya Jnana. And sixth, which is Preeti Sandarbha, is Prayojana Jnana. So basically Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana covered in a fantastic way. So that is actually the Srimad Bhagavatam. Wow. Fantastic. Because I was not expecting. His parents are also there? Oh, only he has come. Oh, for the party. Correct. Yeah. Okay. So basically, this is the basic introduction to this, Shada Sandarbha. So in this, and not only that, now interesting thing is, this whole Sandarbha which is there, he has written in Sanskrit, and he has given a commentary to that also, Sarva Samvadini, which is also in Sanskrit. So, that means he has written the text, which is actually prose. It's not like Bhagavatam poetry. It is like prose. Like you have seen 5th canto and all towards the end, how it is prose. Kind of long, it's not poetry. So it's prose descriptions, because it's, and then that has a purport also. So in that way, very extremely sound. So, in fact, he has composed 4 lakh, verses. That is his entire compilation, personal contribution in Sanskrit. This besides all the commentary that he has written, please remember. Okay, which is like phenomenal, mind-boggling. When we were in Mayapur in one ILS seminar, so there, there are a group of 10-15 devotee scholars. I met them, most of them Westerners. They are all been trained by Gopi Prandan Prabhu, and they are translating all these things. So I was just wondering, so many of you are there, how much time, I thought that you may perhaps finish everything very quickly. After talking to them, I understood that in their whole life, 6-10 scholars in Sanskrit, who has already studied Sanskrit for 10 years full time, 30-year-old young men, जिसने 10 साल अपना पूरा जिंदगी संस्कृत ही पढ़ा है अभी. They may literally their whole life, if they even manage to do only Jiva Goswami's writing translation, that will also be considered an achievement. What to speak of others. So now you can imagine what that person must have done, who wrote the original stuff. So we are talking about material genius over here, which is just phenomenal. So even if we don't understand most or whatever, or if we don't even have the time to read it, at least we can appreciate what kind of personalities were there in our legacy, which at least, which is very important. Okay, so what I am going to do now is, so basically Gopi Prandan Prabhu, before he departed from this world, there was the last book that he translated, TattvaSandarbha, the first of the 6. Okay, the first of the 6. In that, the first part is proving greatness of Bhagavatam. Okay, so that is of course extremely elaborately done by him, but I am just quoting very salient points from that, some things which are very simple and some more examples kind of things which people can actually relate to. So what Jiva Goswami does is, he starts his whole Sandarbha, by giving credit to Gopala Bhatta Goswami, saying that this whole concept of Sandarbha, Shad Sandarbha, was initially sketched out by Gopala Bhatta Goswami, and I have only taken those ideas and built on it. So he kind of, offers the whole credit to him only in the beginning. So in fact, we really don't even know how much Gopala Bhatta Goswami did and how much Jiva Goswami did, though most scholars feel that Jiva Goswami only has done everything. Perhaps Gopala Bhatta Goswami must have given him the layout or something like that. But the interesting thing is that in the parampara which is there is no rush to take credit. That's the basic thing. There is no rush to take credit that I have done it. Oh, rush hai hi nahi yahan par. Because it is explained that novelty is not considered very important in parampara. Novelty means bringing out new things. That's not considered important at all. What is considered important in commentary and writings is presenting the same old thing, but presenting in a manner which is required, for a particular target audience. So Jiva Goswami is addressing all kinds of scholars and devotees, to tell them how Bhagavatam can be categorized into Sambandha Avideya Prayojana. You understood? Of course, even to do that requires a lot of, so I'm not trying to take away credit by saying that novelty is, not there. But what I'm just trying to say is that novelty is not considered too important here. That means the ability to, speculate so-called newer things or, something very new. It was never considered very important. Most important was to address the audience, and as he says, time to time there will be different kinds of audience who will have different needs, and there will be different challenges that will come up by the modern society, by the outside society. So Vaishnavas are needed to present the same philosophy to defend these current challenges. So that is actually that is where intelligence of Vaishnavas is always directed. So that is the primary thing. And interestingly, he starts off his books by saying that anybody who is not interested in worshipping Krishna as the main goal of his life, I curse him not to touch my book. He starts with a curse only. In the 4th verse only he says. So it is explained that is his mercy. So that unnecessarily people will not dig in his books. Though of course, even though he has cursed, it is, even though I said that, if you go to several universities, there are, many scholars, who are, into, what shall I say, doing PhD on his books and all that. People speculate. In fact, the surprising thing is that, there are many times, like in the Western world, in ISKCON itself, we have seen sometimes, some devotees, who are introduced by Srila Prabhupada into ISKCON, after some time they could not practice or whatever, then they joined a university and they did PhD in all these topics, and they used all these topics to say that how actually, there is much more, they used it to unnecessarily criticize Prabhupada. Are you understanding? Means it's very foolish actually, and they are not practicing bhakti also. You understand what I'm saying? So this is considered nonsense actually. It's, so unfortunately, people fall into such foolish things as well. So that is why it's important that devotee scholars who are actually practicing principles of bhakti read scripture and explain. There is competency and there is character, but in this context, both are required. Only that competency will not help. That's how it is. So anyway, so Jiva Goswami, what he does is the layout of his first part, I'll just briefly explain, is that he begins by talking about Pratyaksha Anumana Shabda, which is the simplest thing that we all learned in device. But of course, he just doesn't say about Pratyaksha Anumana Shabda, he says that there are 10 ways of acquiring knowledge. Like for example, there is analogies, that's considered one way of acquiring knowledge. There is tradition, that is one way of acquiring knowledge. You understood? So like this, there are 10 methods. So I'm not even going into all that because that would be extremely technical. I'm just taking Pratyaksha Anumana Shabda because that's something known to everyone. So we can work on known boundaries. Yeah, you can just bring that chair. You can sit there, over there, so you'll be comfortable. We have reserved it for you. Yeah. So he begins, so the layout, so I'll just briefly describe the layout of the discussion in the essay, at least the part which I have taken to discuss over here. He begins by proving that among Pratyaksha Anumana Shabda, why Shabda is the best. And then he goes on to say, since Shabda is the best, let us look at the Vedas. Then he looks at all the Vedas, Puranas and everything, and he again analyzes and comes to the conclusion how Bhagavatam is the best. So that's the layout. It's a very simple thing. So let's see the first part, Pratyaksha Anumana Shabda. So he says basically, he defines what is Pratyaksha, he defines the 4 defects. He says what is Anumana. He says that Shabda has one characteristic. He says that even in the material realm, there are certain things you can accept only by word of authority. You cannot debate on this in terms of, you cannot say that I want Pratyaksha evidence for this. He gives examples, simple examples he gives. He says, for example, suppose if a mother tells a child that, my dear child, when you were in my womb, at that time I was in Mathura. Suppose if a mother tells a child that when you were in my womb, I was in Mathura at that time. Of course, now the child is born and maybe they are in Bengal right now. How is the child going to verify this? As in from Pratyaksha perspective, it is impossible. You just have to accept the mother's statement only. I was Mathura mein thi bas. Aur kya bol raha hai abhi? So he starts by giving such examples that even in the material domain, you have so many things for which you just need to accept Shabda Praman. So he says, of course, some statements you can prove. Like if, for example, he says that fire counteracts ice. He says simple. This is based on physics. Fire counteracts ice. If you have ice and if you have fire, ice will, it counteracts it. It makes the ice into water. So this is something you can verify by pratyaksha. But there are so many things which you cannot verify at all, even in the material realm. Okay. So he gives more examples. I mean, these examples, because it is coming from his era, it is little different. In fact, many of his examples are totally. You understand what I'm saying? Because when an acharya gives examples, also it's related to that era. About what are actually people talking over there and that. So very interesting examples he gives. A little different than what we say. He says, for example, so from this example, I'm understanding basically the context. He says that in those times, snakes, people would be bitten by snakes, cobra. And at that time, one method of removing poison was mantra. You understand? By mantra, you can remove the poison. So he says that, so this is a fact actually. So nowadays, we may not believe it. But there have been people in India, perhaps there are even, who can remove the poison by a mantra. So he says that, suppose a person is bitten by a poisonous cobra, and then he goes to this particular tantric healer, who removes the poison and he makes a statement. Don't worry, the poison in your body is gone now by my mantra. When he says this, he says, this fellow Shabda has validity. Because he is a man of that domain. He is a mantra healer. So he has said, your poison has gone. So when he says your poison has gone, even though you may feel fear in your heart, shayad poison abhi bhi hai, you have to be confident. What he is saying is correct. In pratyaksha mein, you may not be able to understand also how my poison went. Because apparently he didn't even touch your body. Kuch dur se baith ke mantra bola, poison nikal gaya bol raha hai. But you have to accept it, he says. Because that's what we are seeing all around. There are people who are removing snake poison via mantra. You understood? So this is an example from his era. So of course, modern example we can understand. Sometimes the person is sick, and he's, let us say, he had cancer or something, and he's undergoing chemotherapy and all that treatment. He's still feeling his body is not very good, but the doctor says, don't worry, the cancer has gone from your body. So even though he himself has not completely healed, he accepts that Shabda Praman. As in whatever. Of course, here it is more gross because there are some reports and all that will show and whatever. But in any case, I'm just saying that the value of Shabda is there. Doctor said, tumhara bimari chala gaya, matlab, uska ek validity hai. It's not just a normal thing, So he's giving such examples. He gives another example. He says from Ayurveda. He says in Ayurveda, he gives an example by saying that Ayurveda has a concept that if gold is ingested in a particular fashion, in a medicine, that means if gold is taken in a particular medicine, it becomes oily in your internal system. That means gold, which is metal, if it is taken as a medicine in a particular proportion in Ayurveda, it becomes oily in your system. So he says that from pratyaksha perspective, how can you show this? That gold, which is a metal, became oily in your system. You have to just accept the Shabda only over here. The Shabda is being said that it becomes oily, it becomes oily. Or for example, he says that if somebody is haunted by a ghost, ordinary person does not understand only that this fellow has been haunted by a ghost. But there are people who know this signs of ghost. When you take this fellow to him, that fellow says, iske system mein ghost aaya hua hai. So his Shabda is having value. Though from pratyaksha perspective, you cannot understand only ghost kidhar hai, kya hai. And an ordinary man doesn't know ki ghost sachi mein hai ki nahi hai. But that fellow who is there, that whatever, I don't know what they call that, ghost remover, exorcist, yeah. He understands that ghost is there here. So his Shabda has value. So he's giving all material examples just to show, that the word of a person has value, despite, the fact that pratyaksha may not be immediately available, Or he gives another example. So then, of course, I'll not go more because we will get lost a little bit, but I'm just giving some examples of this. Then he talks about Anumana. This whole Anumana is generally based on, Anumana means, hypothesis. It has potential mistakes because it is made of 5 principles, he says. At least that's what Anumana was as it understood. I think today also it is understood pretty much the same way. He says, for example, suppose if there is some smoke coming from a mountain and you're looking from far, that from a mountain there is smoke. So what is the immediate guess? There is fire in the mountain. Precisely. There is fire in the mountain. So he's asking, why do you come to such a conclusion that there is fire in the mountain? He's saying, because Anumana means 5 steps. That means when you want to say that there is fire in the mountain, that is what you want to prove. First step is you want to prove that there is fire. For that you are looking for some evidence. In this case, the evidence is smoke. And you have other experiences that smoke gives fire. Like for example, in your kitchen, when you have smoke, then fire, then there is smoke. So you apply that situation to this context, and you say that, you see, here there is smoke, that means there is fire. He says this is actually Anumana. And I think this fits exactly in what we talk of Anumana, right? Because what we talk of Anumana means what? You don't have Pratyaksha Praman for it, but you are guessing. From what you know, you are guessing what you don't know. From what you know, you are trying to understand what you don't know. You are extrapolating. This is actually Anumana. So he gives this whole methodology of Anumana, 5-step process. But he says there is not at all necessary that smoke should be there. There are so many reasons why fire could be there. He says, for example, there is one Suryakanta stone. He talks about one particular stone. He says this stone, when it is in contact with the sun, it becomes extremely hot and it gives fire. It gives smoke. So it may not be out of direct fire, so to speak, maybe because of that stone. Or he says, he quotes some kind of creepers which are poisonous, and these poisonous creepers give poisonous vapors. So he quotes that particular creeper, and he says that it is possible that on that mountain those creepers are growing, and because of that the fire is coming. So there are so many possibilities actually. So just by looking at the smoke to say that there is fire, this is the Anumana process, and this is wrong. He says, this is not 100% foolproof. You understood? So like this, he basically talks of Pratyaksha and Anumana. What you want to prove, that means you want to say that there is fire, there is some evidence, that is smoke. There are past experiences of how fire has come. Of course, in this case, we have only one. And then, you apply that to the current situation. Because you have not seen the fire, but you apply it, and then you come to your conclusions. These are 5 steps. So he basically says that Shabda is very, very powerful. Then he says another thing. He says, Shabda is how we all grow in our life. He says that, every child, if he has to learn language, he learns from his parents, and that is Shabda only. He says, Jiva Goswami says that if, suppose a child, you do not teach him any language, and you allow him to just wander around here and there, he says that the child will never learn anything. He cannot learn any language properly. And interestingly, I came across one devotee, I forgot who, he was telling this point that somebody, nowadays though there are many researchers, they have made some kind of survey where they expose some group of children from childhood not to teach them any language and to see whether they come up with languages. And they understood that after even 7-8 years also they have not come up with anything. They are just, talking some random thing. You understood? So that means even though the human being has the ability to talk, he has to be taught through Shabda, a language, like your mother and father teach you. Otherwise you are not going to learn any language. So Jiva Goswami gives this example to say that, you have to learn. So this of course goes pretty much against all the modern concepts that, how everybody has, they have evolved and, languages have come and all that. He says that it's not possible only. Nobody can learn any language like that. Come up with a language. It has to be taught, So after having spoken about all this, he comes to the Vedas. He comes to the Vedas and the Puranas. And then he again talks about them very elaborately, by saying that, how the kind of Shabda that Veda Praman is there, it is superior to all the examples that I have given you, he says. Even he says all this Ayurveda and everything, which are kind of, secondary level of scriptures. We are talking about the Shruti and the, kind of the Puranas and all that. They are superior to everything. He says, whatever examples we were giving you, this is from the mundane perspective. This fellow's ghost is there, this fellow's snake poison has gone away. He's saying, but the Vedic Praman is not like this. This is superior to this category also. That's the first thing he talks about. Then he basically talks about the Puranas. He says that the Puranas which are there, he goes into terminology of Purana. He says, what is Purana? Purana means many things, Purana means, what is one meaning of Purana? History. But he quotes another meaning of Purana saying, Purana means to complete. It comes from some adjective verb, whatever, Purna Karna or Pura Karna, or I don't know, whatever it is. I don't want to speculate over here, but he says, Jiva Goswami says that Purana means to complete. He says, imagine you have a gold bangle. And he says, let us say the gold bangle is incomplete for some reason. You want to complete it. He says, when you want to complete the gold bangle, you have to use gold only to complete it. You cannot use tin to complete a gold bangle. So similarly, he says that the scripture which is used to complete the Veda has to be Vedic only. It cannot be anything less than that in any quality. He says this because even by that time, 500 years ago, the concept among, especially the impersonalists, because of Shankaracharya, was that the Vedas, the Shrutis are most authentic and the Puranas are secondary. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu never accepted that, because that's not the Vedic conclusion also. They are all part of the same family. What to speak of modern scholars? They also say the same thing. Shruti is different, Purana. I mean, the modern scholars, they dissect every part of the Vedic thing. Puranas, Upanishads, everything they say came in different era according to different situation. And they dissect it completely without understanding that the whole thing is one living being. You can't break one living being into parts like this. It's based on that. So he says, for example, that the Vedas, basically, if you read the Vedas, it appears as if the Vedas are basically nothing but prayers offered to personification of nature. Like, for example, in Rig Veda, it is all prayers to Indra. There is Agni. It appears as if, they are all prayers to the personifications of nature. Are you understanding? But the Upanishads, which are there, correct that understanding. They say that, they show how actually all these personalities which are there, they are part of that one Brahman. And the Puranas which are there, they basically complete it. Because the Vedas are, talking about principles, but Puranas are talking about case studies. So they complete it. And because they complete it, they are called Purana. And because they complete the Vedas, they are Vedic in quality. They are of the same status as Shruti. So you cannot, put them at any lesser level than that. Then he goes on to say that actually he says that the Vedas and Puranas are all eternal. Just like he says that the Shruti is eternal is a well-established fact. You understood? Because see, please remember, he is not addressing a non-believer audience. He is addressing an audience which is cultured and which accepts things primarily. So according to that understanding, even today, if you see, the understanding is that Shruti which is there is, like we say, Shruti is changeless by the word. All of you have heard this, right? Shruti is changeless by the word. So it's eternally true. But our understanding is that Vyasadeva compiled the Puranas. I mean, Vyasadeva wrote the Vedas also, as in he put it into writing, and he also compiled the Puranas. He says the Puranas are also eternal only. Vyasadeva compiled the Puranas. That's the only thing is that the Puranas, the word sequence is not very important, but it is also compilation only. So he goes on to quote various sources and he explains that how in Brahmaji's planet, originally the Puranas are of 1 billion verses. In our world, the 18 Puranas are 4 lakh verses. So they're a very small subset of that 1 billion original. Because that also we don't have time to read and finish. The 18,000 is Bhagavatam. So अगर 1 billion देते तो हमको प्रॉब्लम हो जाता है ना, हाउ टू फिनिश इट, कैसे पढ़ने का वो सबको तकलीफ हो जाता. So we are given only a little bit. 4 lakh verse दिया हुआ है. So he says Puranas are only 4 lakh verses. I mean, the current manifestation, so to speak, to all of us. He says they are only 4 lakh verses. But though in Brahma's planet it is actually 1 billion. Then he goes on to say the position of Vyasa. He says that how these Vyasas come in every Kali Yuga and do this compilation. So he quotes authority to say how in the 26th Manvantara, I mean in the 26th Divya Yuga, the Vyasa was Parashara. Our current Krishna Dvaipayana's father, Parashara, was the Vyasa in the 26th. In the 28th, Krishna Dvaipayana is the Vyasa. Next, Ashwadhama is the Vyasa. So the Vyasa keeps changing. Who will be the Vyasa? The compiler. That changes. That position changes. So he says another very interesting thing, which is again a well understood fact. He says the Vedic mantras which are there, mantras and everything in the Vedic culture, they are all eternal. They are always there. Sometimes they are lost. But he says that when somebody does a lot of tapasya and when he is very powerful, rishis, he says rishis in the Vedic system are not originators of mantras, but they are transmitter of mantras. They get access to a mantra and they transmit it to the, to the next generation of people. You understood? So that is how, he says the position of rishis. So he gives an example. He says, for example, there is Katha Upanishad. Katha Upanishad means what? The Upanishad spoken by a rishi called Katha. And he says that in every cycle of Divya Yuga, some rishi will be there who will be called Katha, by some divine arrangement. So Katha aega and he will be a scholar and he will only somehow get access to the Upanishad and he will speak it out. So everything happens according to that. So he gives as an example. So he said, and this way, they all transmitted. But he says one difference between the Vedas and the Puranas are which again, please remember, which was even understood 500 years back, which is even true today in India also, if you see, is that to study the Shruti, you have to be a Brahmana. But to study the Puranas, anybody can access it. I know this for sure because, I mean, of course, because, you know, when I was a child at that time, so my father had enrolled me in one school. I mean, school means, you know, one Brahman teacher. He would teach us, you know, Veda, some part of Yajurveda, you know, chanting, you know. So, you know, we would go. So, in that school where this fellow would teach, this fellow was like a pakka, our teacher, you know, my teacher who was there, he was a pakka Advaitavadi. Advaitavadi means to the core. You know, I've never seen anyone like that. Strong Shankarite. Because I had spoken to him later. After I came to ISKCON, I would speak to him. Then I understood actually what Prabhupada is saying about Mayavadi and who is a Shankarite. You know, a very rare species he was. You know, I mean, it's lost actually because it's not there now. You know, such people you don't see actually. We see in the book, Prabhupada talks about Mayavadi. Kidhar hai lekin? You know, I mean, somebody who is actually into it. He was that person, my teacher. Like phenomenal guy. So, you know, he would teach us Yajurveda. And what happened was that, you know, many other, you know, in the community where I was living in Bombay, some other people of some other caste, you know, not Brahmin caste, so to speak, you know, so they came and they asked him, can we also learn? We also want to learn. He asked their caste, caste and all. He said, not Brahmin? No, I'll not teach you. I teach only Brahmin boys, he said. Out, he said. You cannot learn. Then one or two boys were coming and just standing, you know, because he was teaching us in a temple hall. So they would just stand a little far and they would keep reciting. This fellow would say, you know, like something like that. He would get angry. He would stop it only. It was like a very, you know, real kattar, you know, in that principle. You know. But then when he was teaching the Purana section, he was teaching us, you know, certain Puranic sections. That time he allowed everybody to come. He said, this all of you can chant, no problem. This everyone can chant, he said. So from that I understood even at that time that this was a well understood fact even from very ancient times. Because, you know, that's coming in that tradition. That Shruti, it's only Dvija can chant. That's another reason we all say, na, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, in the Upanishad, it comes as Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Then it becomes a Vedic mantra. You know, so Mahaprabhu, you know, reversed it the other way. Of course, even for other, what shall I say, spiritual reasons, as in Krishna's position and everything. You know, so Mahaprabhu gave that. You know, so, you know, many times our devotees feel that in Ganpati Arati they chant wrongly. They are chanting correctly only. We are chanting. We are also chanting correctly, but for a different line we are chanting correctly. But they are not chanting wrong. What they are chanting is correctly. They are chanting from the Upanishad quote, basically. Kali Upanishad they are chanting. You know. So anyway, so basically, you know, so Jiva Goswami goes on to explain this concept that how the Puranas are for everyone. Anybody can access the Puranas. So that's the greatness of the Purana. That doesn't mean it is less. He says that it is just that access is given to everyone. You know, so that anybody can access the stories and pastimes of the Lord. Then he basically says that, you know, then he comes to this very nice thing. He says that there are 18 Puranas. And then, of course, we know, he says that, I know, which 6 are in goodness, passion, ignorance. Then he says, many times people, when they read the Puranas, they wonder, why all these Puranas are apparently glorifying different gods and are apparently contradicting each other. Like, I remember this very well because, you know, because again, going back to my own whatever background, you know, I would have a lot of debate with my father, you know, when I had initially come to ISKCON. Because my father was kind of, at least, you know, he was very well versed with several things. So he was telling me, hey, your Bhagavad Purana, I understand Bhagavad Purana talks about Krishna, but he said there are other Puranas. So he would tell stories of other Puranas to me, which I later understood are correct only what he's saying. The stories are bona fide. Like, for example, he would tell me one story from some Shiva Purana or something. He would say that where there is a pastime where Lord Shiva grows bigger and bigger and bigger, and he sets a competition that Vishnu should try to touch my feet and, you know, Brahma should try to touch my head. And, you know, neither of them are able to touch. Shiva is going bigger. So he would quote, I mean, of course, there is a very big thing. I'm not saying the whole thing. But he would tell me such pastimes and then he would challenge that, you know, why, so what do you say about this then? So, I mean, I really had no answer at that time. Of course, now one thing we know, so one way to look at it is that those 6 are for Tamoguna people, so that is why it is glorifying the person of Tamoguna. But again, if you see, that is not a very complete reason, because then one may feel, arey, fir Sattvagun mein Sattvagun ka praise hai, Rajogun mein Rajogun ka, Tamogun ka praise. So what is the integrity? So Jiva Goswami says one thing interesting. He says, what happens is, in different days of Brahma, that means the Kalpa, different days of Brahma, different days of Brahma are predominated by different modes of material nature. He says some days of Brahma are predominated by the mode of goodness, some days of Brahma are predominated by the mode of passion, whereas other days of Brahma are predominated by the mode of ignorance. The whole day of Brahma only is kind of influenced strongly by mode of ignorance. That does not mean that goodness people does not exist, but it's just that the environment is going to be a little tougher, like Kali Yuga we say, So the whole day of Brahma is prominently in this thing like that. So that is the influence everywhere. So he says what happens is though the pastimes which are there in the 6 Puranas of the Tamoguna category, they quote all the instances of those days of Brahma in which Tamoguna dominated, and hence that actually happened like that. Shiva actually defeated Vishnu in that particular duel. You understood? Because it was the domination of Tamoguna in that particular this thing. So Vishnu as the Sattva Guna, whatever, the Guna avatar, he takes a umbral position at that time. So he talks about the Bhagavad Puran being primarily of this day of Brahma. This is again a very understood fact, because the Bhagavad Puran is talking about, if you know, Swayambho Manu, Sarojasa Manu, Uttama Tamasa Raivata, Chakshusha Vaivasvata Manu. We are talking about the current day of Brahma, the current situation. So the current day of Brahma. So in different days of Brahma, so apparently it seems that, of course he doesn't write that, but from that I assume that this day of Brahma has some goodness element apparently, because we have such wonderful things, whatever. So he basically says that in this way, different Puranas have are drawing from different days of Brahma. This first thing he says. Second thing he says is, unfortunately he says, since the time of Kali Yuga began, which of course at Jiva Goswami's time was 4,500 years old, he says that many unscrupulous elements have done meddling in the words of the Puranas. So he says that the words of many Puranas have been affected by several unscrupulous elements. They have gone in and done some things. In the Sanskrit they have done that. This has not happened with the Shruti, because that has come in a different sampradaya, but Puranas it has happened, he says. So he says because of that, there are only 2 Puranas, he says, which are, among all of them, which we can accept, without any fear. He says the Bhagavad Purana and the Vishnu Purana. Why? He says Bhagavad Purana and Vishnu Purana have been thoroughly analyzed by Sridhara Swami, Ramanujacharya, and the entire, the Ramanuja Sampradaya and Madhuvas. These people have actually taken a lot of effort. He quotes Sridhara Swami's work, where these people have taken they have actually ensured that they get a consistent copy of Bhagavad Purana, which is free from any interferences. And then he says that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted, that is why Sridhara Swami as an authority, and accepted his work as extremely important. So he says that is why we can accept these Puranas without any fear. But whereas in some cases there is some problem, he says, which is again he says honestly that's the situation. I just remembered that Shamanand Prabhu or someone was once saying that, especially there is one Skanda Puran, in which there are many kind of modifications. So in fact there is a joke among Brahmin community that if any story or pastime is there and you don't know what is the authority, you can just say that yes, Skanda Puran ka story. So that's kind of a joke among Brahmin community, where basically you can just attribute it to that Skanda Puran, which is anyway switch case. So he is giving a computer analogy. He is saying switch case and default. So he says that it is the Skanda Puran. Yeah, some Puranas, he says. No, Jiva Goswami's time. I'm talking 500 years back. Jiva Goswami, British kidhar aaye, Prabhuji? Before Jiva Goswami's time only. Before, see, Kali Yuga shuru hoke 4,500 saal ho gaya tha na, Prabhuji, us time mein. No, that is of course a totally different thing. That was never the same. That's a different thing. As I'm saying, that's why I'm talking about the role of Acharyas. Of course, he talks about Mahabharata also. He says that Madhvacharya has worked on Mahabharata and Ramanujacharya's Acharyas in his line, they have worked on these 2 Puranas, Bhagavat and Vishnu, to set it right. You remember that Yamunacharya's instruction to Ramanujacharya, 3 instructions? One instruction was to give a purport to Vishnu Puran. Right? 3 था ना, एक वेदांत सूत्र पे कमेंट्री लिखो, एक क्या है वो दूसरा वाला पराशर नाम रखो एक डिसाइपल को, और तीसरा create a commentary on Vishnu Puran. So these people have been working on Purana since that time. You understood? But these changes we are talking are not British or Mughal era. वो उसके पहले वाले. अब कलियुग का शुरू होके कितना टाइम हो गया? So he's saying that these two are the most authentic. Of course, that doesn't mean that the others are not. They will have different degree of authenticity. But again, there is some fear, whether everything is exactly in its place or not. But he's saying in these two Puranas you don't have to worry. Jiva Goswami says. So that is the certification. Because he quotes Sridhara Swami, he quotes the acceptance of these by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You see, we have an authority over here. What we are talking, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's authority is there, na? Where he has accepted Sridhara Swami's work. That's why in Chaitanya Charitamrita you see this. When that Venkata Bhatta is saying that I have rejected Sridhara Swami, he says you cannot reject Sridhara Swami. How can you reject Sridhara Swami? He is our authority. He has done what not he has done for us. How can you talk about him like this? He says. So that is the fantastic thing. Yeah, go ahead. Sridhara Swami is approximately 200 years before Mahaprabhu. So I think that would be Mahaprabhu's 1486, means he would be either 13th century or something like that. And Ramanujacharya is of course the 10th and 11th century. Yeah, go ahead. I never said Puranas have come later on. I said they are always eternal. Vyasadeva compiled them. Vyasadeva compiled the Vedas, Vyasadeva compiled Puranas. But the difference is, in Vyasadeva's compilation of the Veda, every word is always true. But in Vyasadeva's compilation of the Puranas, things change. And the Vedas the 4 Vedas are learnt only by hearing. And I personally, again, going back to my own example, the teacher who would teach me, in childhood, there was no book only. He never gave us a book. We used to ask him, "Jara koi book do?" He said, "No book." Why? This is not the method only of learning. You got to hear and learn. He would say one word, and if he would have that, we call it this thing, this hand fan. He say, "Thak bhi de de, galat bola to." Swar rehta, ding, 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 one up, 2 up, and 1 down. So so there was swara in it. So yeah, so it was like, so that is how the Vedas are learned, by word. So the protection scheme was even more prominent. Are you understanding? There is a real reason also why you cannot meddle with the Shruti, because the Shruti is learnt by word. And but the Puranas are not like that. It is not learned by word, by its own nature. It is just Sanskrit, which is more simpler to understand. It was written with the intention that everybody can access it. But when you have a system where everybody can access, that danger apparently, whatever is there. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. No, that's not yeah. Okay, 3,000 years. Yeah, there are 2-3 things here. The first thing is that when we say that the Shruti needs the Smriti for completion, it is not in the context that Shruti comes first and something is not there, though something has to come to plug in. It's not in that context. It is a context that one thing is talking about principles and something, and the other is talking about cases. So you need both. If the cases are not there, you don't understand principles so well. Like for example, Upanishads are talking about principles by and large. But the Puranas are talking about cases. Even the Vedas are talking about worship offered to different gods, but the Puranas are talking about case studies of how when you worship God, what happens. So it is in that context you are supposed to see the bangle completion story. It's not in the context that there was a bangle which was half and now we were wondering how to plug in, so you added something. So then in that the linearity comes in. But here there is no linearity. It is one whole system where something has some purpose and there is another purpose. When both purposes come together, it becomes a complete unit. It's in that context you have to see that it is this thing. That's the first thing. Second thing is, as far as this point about man-made and things like that, what you are saying, this is exactly what Indologists and others have been saying. What these Indologists had done when they came to India is they analyzed the Sanskrit, and they said that this scripture, this era, this scripture, this era, based on the quality of the Sanskrit language. It was mainly done by Max Muller. And interestingly, Max Muller at the end of his life, he wrote a letter to his wife saying that whether the Rig Veda was composed 1200 years ago, 2000 years ago, 5000 years ago, nobody in the world can ever determine. So this was a published letter of his where he wrote to his own wife. So basically the thing is, the whole thing was in a speculative zone. And what you are saying, that also comes in within that category only. So that means the Bhagavad is talking about kings. And you know, when the Bhagavatam stops, the Bhagavatam doesn't stop at a point which was that current era. Rather, the Bhagavatam stops at a point saying that now onwards, everybody has become totally useless. It's not even worth mentioning. That means at one point they start saying that how kings, you know, one king, a minister would kill the king, and you know, that Nanda's minister killed Nanda and took over the throne. And then they say that then onwards all kings were like this only and people were all like this. So then, you know, the Bhagavatam doesn't find any meaning in talking about, for example, the Mughals came. I mean, they are not even worth mentioning in the sacred pages of the Bhagavatam from that perspective. So the point basically is that ultimately the Shabda Praman is extremely important. Authority is very important. We're coming back to that basics. Are you getting this point? Because from our perspective, when we sit down and try to speculate in this connection, you know, then we may arrive at such conclusions, which is exactly the conclusions both the Indian Mayavadi scholars as well as the British Indologists arrived at. But that is the challenge. You get it? So that's why I have authority. So that's why Jiva Goswami, he quotes the authority of Ramanujacharya's work, Madhva's work. He says these people have worked all their life to do only this, to get the scripture in hand. Like, just like I'll tell you, Chaitanya Charitamrita. It was compiled 400 years back by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. In the 19th century, it was not there. Bhaktivinoda Thakur worked for 7 years to get one copy of CC. And at that time also, he says that there were different copies of CCs which were like, you know, phenomenally different from each other, because it was in Bengali, people had done something. So he says he consulted the Babajis of that time, Jagannath, whatever, whoever he was under, to get one proper copy of CC. So the point is that over a period of time, Dharma, especially from the Puranic section, see, so the Puranic thing, the challenge basically is what? Challenge is because it is accessible to everyone, it can be corrupted by many people. You understand? That's the so-called challenge. But then there's a trade-off. If you did not give everybody access, same problem would be there. What is the problem with Shruti? Like Shruti, if you see, other than Brahman, you cannot chant only Shruti. But in Purana, that limitation is not there. You know, so there is easy access. So when there is easy access, preservation is a challenge. So that's the point. But still Jiva Goswami says, so please note, Jiva Goswami's point is that there is no cause of any problem only. The most important one, the Bhagavad and the Vishnu Puranas have been protected by our Acharyas, have been made consistent by them. So that is the authority we have. Sridhara Swami, Ramanujacharya, all these people's work. That's what they did all their life, to get an integrated copy for all. So that's why, you know, many times when we are talking about Acharyas, we may not even know, you know, what they have done for us. You understood? Sometimes we wonder, itne sare Acharya hai, you know, how it is relevant. You just don't know. The relevance is phenomenal actually. You know, so he says that, you know, this is and then he goes on to explain goodness, passion, ignorance. And of course, I'm not going into that discussion. Then he says that how, you know, goodness is the best mode to situate in. And because of that, he says that how the Bhagavad Puran is the best category of Puran. Now, then he goes on to say why Bhagavad is the best category of Puran. He says that the difference between the Bhagavatam and all the other 17 Puranas is that all the other Puranas glorify Bhagavatam. He quotes from Matsya Puran and this Puran and that Puran. Every Puran glorifies Bhagavatam. But he says Bhagavatam does not glorify these other ones. That you should read that Puran. There is no statement in the Bhagavatam that please read Matsya Puran if you want to know this. But Matsya Puran glorifies Bhagavatam. Similarly, Padma Puran glorifies Bhagavatam. So he says that all the other Puranas, they glorify Srimad Bhagavatam. But Srimad Bhagavatam need not, you know, glorify the others, because it's a different class of its own. So that's one thing he says. Yeah. That's the point. That's exactly the point. That basically proves that Bhagavad is an eternal Purana. It was just manifested at that time by Vyasa. The concept of Bhagavad Puran is an eternal concept, but it was not there at that time. You exactly brought out what I actually wanted to say. That the other, see, interesting. You answered the question, right? Bhagavad Puran written by Vyasa at the end. Oh, Bhagavad to tha hi nahi. How are they glorifying Bhagavad? Because Bhagavad Puran is an eternal Purana. See, that's why you would again come back to what Jiva Goswami is saying. None of these Puranas are written by Vyasa. He is a compiler of everything. everything exists. It is just that rishis at the right time access that knowledge and bring it for you. But it is there already. And obviously, Krishna Dvaipanana is an incarnation of Vyasa, of Krishna himself. So there's no reason why he will not know that Bhagavad Purana as such exists. But it is not yet manifest currently. So it is referring it. You understood the point?
Pastime was just an excuse.
That just a pastime was just an excuse to bring that into manifestation from his perspective, which he had not done at that time. Because he had not done that. Na? Yeah, there is a reason. That's actually my next point. Jiva Goswami talks about it. He says that the nature of this world is that any pure devotee, he generally thinks, he said even pure devotees, sometimes they think, he says that, I'll tell you exactly. Yeah. He says that a pure devotee may think that a pure devotee, he says, sometimes may have, by some reason, he may forget the main core role which he has to play in this world. Because of which, he may think that, I have to first of all do many other things. I have to satisfy everybody. Like for example, like we say in Prabhupada's context, Prabhupada was trying to, set up a business to satisfy his family, do many things. But Krishna was repeatedly trying to tell through dreams and other things that you have to get out and take sannyas and do what, I want you to do. You understood? So he says that sometimes pure devotees also may get caught up in so many worldly duties per se. So he said, similarly, Vyasa, he was doing the compilation for everybody. He had to take in all kinds of audience. Iske liye karna, iske liye karna, iske liye karna. So he says that a pure devotee, even in this manifest pastime, has to be reminded by his superior that your main role is in the transcendental cause. And he says in that context, we have the entry of Narada, where Narada comes in and tells Vyasa that, see, you have done everything, but this is pending. You got to do this. So the other scriptures refer it because it's an eternal book. But this doesn't refer anything. That's the basic point. So he basically says that, you understood the point, right? So because it's ultimately the scripture is a eternal scripture. Then basically, so then he says that, how all Puranas, Jiva Goswami quotes, how every Purana glorifies Lord Rama, Lord Krishna, it has to glorify. He says even the Puranas which are in Tamoguna, they have to take shelter of Lord Krishna. Even though they are by and large glorifying Shiva only, still they glorify Krishna in some chapters. He says, for example, Vritrasur pastime is there in so many Puranas. Prahalad pastime is there in even the Puranas of Tamoguna, he says. But he says the difference is the Bhagavad Puran does not glorify the worship of other devatas. No, that is in a different context. It does it in the context of seeing him as a Vaishnava, like the Prachetas are worshipping him, not in the context of the demigod worship per se. Yeah, correct. No, try to understand. The glorification of the demigods in the other Puranas are of a different category totally. There the glorification is in terms of worshipping them to get some material fruit. Here, even when Lord Shiva comes in the Bhagavatam, of course when Lord Shiva comes, he's a great personality, so why will he do some small work? So he's obviously being glorified only. But here the glorification of Lord Shiva, if you see the Bhagavatam, it is in the context of Vaishnavana Meta Shambho and also as a Gunavatar position, how he saves the world. It's from that respect. Bhagavat is never saying that, like for example, you worship Ganapati or you worship Shiva and you will get this fruit. Where is it saying? But the other Puranas talk about worshipping Krishna in that context. Are you getting? Not in the context of material things. Just like, the simple thing what we are saying, like for example, even in Ganpati worship, you have to ultimately say, Achyutam Keshavam Ramanarayanam Krishna Damodaram Vasudevam Bhaje. You have to chant that at the end. You got to chant the Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yeah, so you have to say that. We have by-hearted it because in my college there is Ganpati Puja regularly. So we have been, Sukha Karta, Dukha Harta, we have by-hearted by coming to VIT. He has not by-hearted because he doesn't come often, but as head of department I have. Okay. You understand the point, na? Then he also quotes Mahabharata. He says the meaning of the word Mahabharata, Jiva Goswami says Mahat means great and Bharata means heavy. Mahabharata means the heavy scripture. He says which has, all the concepts of dharma, artha, kama, moksha. That is Mahabharata. And then he talks about Mahabharata work also. Our Madhvacharya's work in the context of, getting Mahabharata consistent. And then he also talks about that how this Mahabharata, then he quotes Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Jiva Goswami. He says that how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted Srimad Bhagavatam at a higher level than Mahabharata. So he says that whenever there is a conflict between the two, you got to accept Bhagavatam. Just like I myself saw a simple this thing. Like for example, if you see Ashwatthama pastime. You know, the Mahabharata says that when Ashwatthama released Brahmastra and Arjun released Brahmastra, Krishna tells, hey, pull it back. Arjun says, I can pull mine back. He pulls his own back. But Ashwatthama sends his directly to Uttara's womb. Are you understanding? But in the Bhagavad, you see, Arjuna pulls both back. You understood? And then he captures Ashwatthama, punishes him, knocks off the jewel, and then Ashwatthama, when he's going away, that time again he throws Brahmastra to Uttara's womb. If you see, Bhagavad description is like that. Slightly different in that technical detail. So Jiva Goswami says that since Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has accepted Bhagavad as a superior authority than Mahabharata, whenever there is any minor contradiction, we accept the Bhagavad version. Because for us, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is our authority. So we accept it that way. You know. Then of course then even about the Mahabharata, you know, he talks about that how Mahabharata was compiled 2 times. You know, one by Vaishampayan and one by Jaimini. You know, he says the Jaimini Mahabharata actually is at the level of Bhagavatam, but that is again unmanifest scripture now. So the Mahabharata that is there is a Vaishampayan's Mahabharata. So anyway, that's a technical detail. Yeah, then then he goes into a very nice thing. He says that the Vedas generally instruct people in the mode of a master. That means if you see the Vedic aphorism, it is like a master instructing someone. He says that the Puranas instruct a person like a friend. You know, Puranas is a friendly advice. You know, they say that you see, like this also happened, why don't you do it? They are more at a friendly level. He said that there are poetic works. He quotes some of them which I could not really capture. But he says that the poetic works which are there, they instruct a person as a lover. In a very sweet language, as a lover does. You know, that's why I think in Hindi cinema they have all these poets and, you know, shairi and all that, you know, because maybe lovers understand, you know, poetry language. So poetic works instruct one as a lover. But he says that the Bhagavatam instructs one as a master, friend and lover. You know, so he goes on to explain that, saying that, you know, how all 3 categories of explanations are there within the Bhagavatam. And then he goes on to say that, you know, somebody may wonder that, you know, why, though we are quoting Ramanuja and Madhva, you know, still why there are some apparent differences between Sampradayas. He says that is because the perspective is different. He says Madhvacharya's perspective was primarily from the vision of the demigods. So he says that is why Madhvacharya never, you know, Madhvacharya's perspective is from the demigod perspective. So he says that is why, for example, Madhvacharya does not accept, did not give any commentary only to the Brahma Vimohan Leela. Because he didn't want, he was like, you know, kind of awkwardly situated how to talk about a chapter that kind of, you know, says that our main demigod only got confused. It was a demigod perspective. And he says the Ramanujacharya's perspective is the Vaikuntha perspective. You know, the Vaikuntha perspective. Of course, the perspective of pure devotion from demigod perspective. Demigod perspective is not about worshipping demigod. Vaishnava perspective only from the demigod side. You know, looking at a Vaishnava. He says Ramanujacharya's perspective is of the Vaikuntha perspective. So he says because it is a Vaikuntha perspective, Ramanujacharya, you know, who is there, he you know, I mean, that's a Vaikuntha perspective. So it basically glorifies mainly 2 rasas, that is the Dasya and reverential Sakya. Reverential Sakya means Sakya, but in a reverential mode. But he says, but the interesting thing he says is, that is why in the Sri Vaishnava writings, if you see Alvar writing and all, they can glorify gopis also. Because he says the Vaikuntha Vasis, even though they are situated in the rasa of Dasya or reverential Sakya, time to time they like to talk about Gopi Bhava, though they themselves are situated in that. So that's why he says that in Alvar's writings, you will see that, you know, suddenly one poetry is glorifying Gopi's position and then second is talking about Dasya Bhav. So they keep going like that. But he says Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's perspective is the Supreme Lord Krishna's perspective, the Vrindavan perspective. So because the perspective of, you know, the Vaishnava understanding is from different perspectives, he says because of this it is but natural that there are some differences in terms of, you know, how you present something. But this is not very serious. He says because these are our authorities. Because throughout his book, he basically quotes as authorities Sridhara Swami, Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya. And because they were his previous acharyas. So he quotes them elaborately and he says that this is the work that they have done. Okay, so this is the first part of our talk. So I'll just summarize the whole thing briefly. And then if there are some questions, we will take it. And then we will see if you want to go to the second part. So basically, I started talking about Jiva Goswami's work in glorifying Bhagavatam by talking about his very important book called TattvaSandarbha. The 6 Sandarbhas which are there, the first one is TattvaSandarbha, which glorifies Bhagavatam. The remaining 3, Bhagavat, Paramatma and Krishna, talk about Sambandha Gyan. The 5th one which is there, Bhakti Sandarbha, talks about Abhideya Gyan. And the 6th one which is Preeti Sandarbha talks about Prayojana Gyan. Then we started talking that how novelty was never very important in India. What was important is talking things in line with parampara, So that's why we see Prabhupada also, when he was asked why your Bhagavad Gita is similar to Ramanujacharya's Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada didn't see that as a defect, he saw that as a glorification. He said, that's fantastic, that's my greatness, that I have not changed anything since Ramanujacharya's time. Prabhupada took that to his advantage, because novelty was not considered important. It was not important to manufacture new things. You have to present the Shastri concepts perfectly according to a requirement. His requirement over here, Jiva Goswami is a scholarly requirement. So he presents it that way. So that's the credit. But then it's not that some new Siddhanta has to be introduced. So that is not there. Then he goes on to say about how Pratyaksha, Anumana, Shabda are the 3 main methods of acquiring knowledge among 10 different methods. And then we saw all those examples of Pratyaksha. You are in my womb in Mathura, you are bitten by a snake but the poison is out, gold ingested becomes oily, he is haunted by a ghost now, fire arises due to smoke arises due to the Surikanta stone, or there are some creepers that give smoke. So he gives all these examples to show that how even in the material domain your Pratyaksha Anumana does not work. In fact he gives even more, but honestly speaking I could not even, I understood only the simplest ones. So he just says that, so he gives several examples, and then he says that, these are all material examples, but what to speak of in the spiritual domain. Then he comes to the Vedas. Of course, I also spoke about, other things like how children, if you don't teach them language, they're not going to learn anything. And Jiva Goswami says that, interestingly, recently I heard it from one lecture also, one devotee, I forgot who. He said, till the age of 8, they have, America mein sabko try karte rehte. They have tried this also out. Whether a child learns knowledge, they understood that fellow doesn't learn any language. He stays dumb only. Dumb as in he just blabbers something, nothing meaningful comes out. So then he says that Vedas are the only solution. Then we spoke about the tin example, how the Purana means completion, and they are compared to the gold. Gold only can complete gold. Then we saw about how the Puranas are also eternal. They are also discovered. They are not invented, but rather they are received, by the Rishi, like Vyasadeva receives it. Then we spoke about why there are differences in Puranas, because they are talking about different days of Brahma, where different modes dominate. And according to the mode domination, that demigod dominates. So some Purana where passion is prominent, those demigods dominate. Dominate as in their glories are, they seem fantastic from a particular perspective. So those pastimes are taken in those Puranas. So then we were talking about how, sometimes, I spoke about Vyasa's role, and how a pure devotee sometimes may forget the most important thing for which he has come. Then we were saying how Bhagavat is praised by all, even by the rivals, how everyone talks of Radha Krishna, and we spoke about Mahabharata and Srimad Bhagavatam. And then Jiva Goswami also says this point, that there are scholars like Vopadeva. Prabhupada mentioned this in Bhagavatam, if you remember, first canto, first chapter, verse 1. About Vopadeva. He says that Vopadeva is a Maharashtrian scholar, and this British Indologist said that Vopadeva wrote Bhagavatam. So Jiva Goswami only writes it 500 years back. He said this Vopadeva, what happened is that this fellow, he wrote a book called Mukta Charita. He wrote a book, he was a Maharashtrian Brahmin who wrote some books where he took verses from Bhagavatam and he wrote that. So because that Mukta Phala and Mukta Charita, whatever, Hari Leela, these books of Vopadeva became very famous. People thought that Bhagavatam only he wrote. But it was like from Bhagavatam he had taken 100 verses and written another book. He didn't have any evil intention, but people made it a different story. So he quotes all these things. So that's about the first part. Okay? Yeah. I'll just take some. I have heard that it is not in the same category of authentication. I'll have to do a little more research in it. But I remember one authority whom I heard, I had asked this question. He told me that we'll have to be very careful and look at work of acharyas to see whether they recommend it. Whether Jiva Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, they talk about it. If not, it has to be taken with a pinch of salt. Bhagavat Mahatmya are different ones like that, Yeah, that is Shankaracharya's compilation. That is so different only. Yeah. No, that is fine. No, Shankaracharya's writings are perfect only. Na? That is Shankaracharya's book. The question is, when is the problem? ये व्यासदेव का बुक है क्या? वो हमको मालूम नहीं. शंकराचार्य का भगवत गीता महात्म्य तो हमको मालूम ही है. Shankaracharya wrote it, so that's fine. Yeah, Shankaracharya's authority is accepted. Come on, Shankaracharya only wrote it, na. Prabhupada accepts it. Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada की भगवत गीता में Prabhupada quotes it introduction में. Bhagavad Gita महात्म्य of Shankaracharya. How will we not accept it? That is correct. See, that's an attraction for people. Na? The Puranas, that way, even Bhagavad, sometimes it is there. You read this, you will get a child or whatever. I mean, that's because different people with different motivation. थोड़ा hook चाहिए ना हरे को आने के लिए. भक्तों को भी चाहिए, प्रसाद वैसा चाहिए, कुछ चाहिए, नहीं तो कौन आएगा प्रोग्राम के लिए? He has arranged prasad from Govinda today, so we are all happy. Yeah. नहीं तो अगर कुछ होता नहीं तो वो उठ जाए. No, the Vedas are more oriented around prayers to various devatas. Like Rig Veda, for example, talks about Indra worship, etc. But the Upanishads, see, the Vedas are more in the Karma Kanda section and the Upanishads are in the Jnana Kanda section. That's it. Simple answer. Okay? Karma Kanda section means to get fruits, to get Somaras, to go to the heaven. But Upanishads are in the Jnana Kanda section. It talks about Brahman. Perfect. Yeah, no, everyone is there. Like Ganapati, Surya, everybody comes. Yeah. In passion. And ignorance, not only Shiva Shakti comes, different devatas come. And in goodness, not only Krishna, Vishnu, different forms of Vishnu, everything comes. Yeah. Yeah. That's not the point. See, it's like this saying that Kali Yuga, because things are going to be bad, doesn't mean everybody is going to be a scoundrel. No. Sridhara Swami came in Kali Yuga. Everybody, Jiva Goswami came in Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is bad only, na? Worst. No, I'm giving you an example. So what I'm saying is, at the universal level, if one mode is dominating, why should it be that, it just means that majority of the people or majority of the cosmic situations will be dominated by that mode. But at every point of time in creation, there is an opportunity for a sincere soul to go back to Krishna. It is just that whether that will be in a much more mass scale or at a smaller scale. That's all. That's the question. You understood the point, na? I mean, बड़ा scale में, छोटा scale में. लेकिन होगा opportunity. वही तो बोल रहा हूँ ना. See, कलियुगा के end में विष्णु, Kalki is born. He is born to a Brahmana, Vishnu Yasha. पता नहीं, तब तक मतलब ब्राह्मणिज्म चलता रहने वाला है मतलब. So that means even at such a time, some Brahman is there who is giving birth to a Kalki. So that means even in the worst of situations, it is just that because the mode, it's like the same example that we give. It's going to rain a lot. That doesn't mean everybody has to get wet. There is floods in Srinagar. That doesn't mean everybody died in Srinagar. 300 people died in Srinagar. Sometimes you will see in the news saying that entire Srinagar has become like a lake. That doesn't mean literally whole Srinagar is a lake. What it means is that there's a lot of water everywhere, but obviously there are some people staying in their palace nicely, peacefully. Uske jagah pe pani nahi hai. You understood? So it's like that, saying that some day of Brahma is dominated by ignorance. That doesn't mean that everybody is necessarily steeped in tamoguna, right from the first day till the last day. You understood the point, na? We are talking about dominance. We are not talking about, we are not saying that, other possibilities do not exist. Got it? Is that okay? Do you have any other question? Yeah, it is prominent. Like Kali Yuga, Kali is prominent. But that doesn't mean that sincere souls are not there. Right? You understand the point, na? That's exactly the point. One second, I'll come to you. I'll just take some minutes. That is one part of it. Yeah, it is talking about Bhagavatam. One thing is glorifying Bhagavatam, another thing is talking about the topics of Bhagavatam. I have not come to that yet. Yeah, go ahead.
before Yuga. So similarly, in a different way, is it that the worship of Shiva becomes the supreme, or the worship of Brahma becomes the supreme in those days? There's something. So because what is the meaning of when you say this is a dominating of a particular guna? So it should mean somewhere else also. Like probably that worship of a particular god is supreme compared to other gods, including Vishnu.
No, it is not like that. It can never be like that, because Siddhantically speaking, something is the truth always. That Siddhanta does not change. What it means is many people may be engaged in that kind of worship, or many people may be engaged in that kind of activity. But that doesn't mean that the Siddhanta changes. You are talking about change of Siddhanta, which is never a possibility. You understand the point?
If the books itself during that day are talking more about a particular thing.
No, that's again, I'm coming to the same point. It doesn't mean that, see, we are used to this concept that only one thing has to be there. It is not like that. That concept itself is wrong. Other options are also there. But it's just like, again, coming back to Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is the worst place. Why Harinam Sankirtan is there here going on? For what? It doesn't suit, right? Does it go well with the age today? It does not. But philosophically and practically also, this is the method. You get the point? It just means that many people may not take it. Many people may not be interested in it. That's okay. Correct? The point is, because the ultimate purpose of the material world is to connect a soul back to God, that facility is always there. But it just depends on the circumstance where you are born at that time, whether that facility is a little more or little less. That's all. But if you can struggle if you want to. Because that can never go. Because Siddhanta does not change. That's the basic point I'm talking. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it may be. See, but the point is, these differences are some technical difference. अभी ये पहला ब्रह्मास्त्र इधर से आया कि उधर से आया कि मतलब ब्रह्मास्त्र उसका ज्वेल निकालने के पहले भेजा कि बाद में भेजा. It's a very technical detail. It's not that important. See, it's like, for example, Prabhupada's stories. Sometimes you will see, Satsvarup Maharaj writes one story, and then you will see Tamal Krishna Maharaj saying the same thing slightly different. You understood? But these are in technicalities which are fine. Yeah. Yeah, that's what Jiva Goswami says, that if there is a contradiction in any story, you take the Bhagavad story as the perfect story. Jiva Goswami says it, so I am just quoting authority.
So just an observation about that chapter Pramana thing.
Yeah.
During the morning or good and long, you take this testify as the strong points of the whole case. Even in modern worship, Pramana is giving the strong good religion, even the popular worship.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, they are karma kanda. It's not. That's your conception. Yeah. Shrutis have 96% karma kanda. Because most people want karma kanda. Yes. In Satyuga, Treta Yuga, people are interested to go to the heavenly planets. Today nobody can go, so you are not interested. If you had an option, people, why everybody is running to America? If you had an option to go to Swargaloka, why wouldn't you take it? अमेरिका में इंटरेस्ट है तो स्वर्गलोक तो उससे भी अच्छा है. ये तो कुछ भी नहीं है अमेरिका. न्यूयॉर्क सिटी. No, but the mentality is the same. Enjoying mentality, the soul has come. Na? Just that high class enjoyment, man. Come on. What nonsense enjoyment here in New York City. I'll go to heavenly planet, drink Somaras. Fantastic. Brilliant lifestyle. यहाँ क्यों बैठना है? Going back to God, it is always super special, more than anything. So it's not that one is greater than the other. That's exactly what you're saying. Jiva Goswami says Bhagavad is better than the Shruti. His conclusion. Yes, he says Bhagavad is better than the Shruti. It's better than all the 4 Vedas and 108 Upanishads. Because you are talking about the highest thing over here. So the concept is wrong. That's what he said out to prove. Right? Perfect. Yeah, it corrects that conception. It comes in some, like there is Gopal Tapani Upanishad that talks about Krishna's supremacy. There is one or two more Upanishads that talk about Krishna supremacy. I forgot the name. Gopal Tapani Upanishad is surely one. In the 100 and it is a top 8 Upanishads. Gopal Tapani Upanishad. It talks about it. Kathopanishad talks about it. Some Upanishads talk about it. Krishna is supreme बोल रहा हूँ यार, विष्णु का है, विष्णु तो है. But by and large, Upanishads address the Brahma of it. That's the goal over there. It is a goal. There are audience for it. Come on, why not? Right? Okay, fine. So we take the topic ahead. क्या अभी status क्या? Yeah, number game तो यार वो तो आएगा ही नहीं यहाँ पर. I mean, that is like an extremely technical topic to talk of in such an audience. I need a board and I need to draw a matrix and talk about it. वो तो होगा ही नहीं इधर. नहीं वो छोड़ दो अभी. वो तो आप बताओ ही मत. You know, we are in college ना. We keep discussing all these things. You know. नहीं नंबर गेम नहीं, दूसरा कोई नंबर गेम है. हम लोगों को कुछ काम नहीं है, कॉलेज में बैठे बैठे बात करते रहते हैं एक दूसरे के साथ. थोड़ा बोर हो गया तो आई गो टू हिज रूम, ही कम्स टू माय रूम. Dhirabadu Chaitanya is there. He also keeps coming. We simply keep talking about things. Okay, anyway, so now I mean we are taking the same topic ahead, glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. Of course, this is a very big topic. So I think I will whatever it is at 8 o'clock I'll stop, because the principle is that we are supposed to talk for 2 hours. So okay, so again continuing from Jiva Goswami, you know. So okay, so still with me despite all the noise and the fantastic prasad that we are about to have from Govinda's, you know, and the cake cutting and everything, so you're not distracted. Okay, so as we know, the Bhagavatam basically talks of 3 topics: Sambandha, Abhideya and Prayojana. These are the 3 primary topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Chakravarti Path basically he categorizes the Srimad Bhagavatam as 1st to 5th canto. So as we know, the entire Srimad Bhagavatam maps on to the transcendental body of the Lord. So from the 1st canto to the 5th canto is from his lotus feet to his waist. That is considered Sambandha Gyan. Okay, Sambandha Gyan primarily. 6th canto to 9th canto is from his belly to his neck. That is considered Abhideya Gyan primarily. 9th, 1st to 5th. And 10th to 12th is considered from his lotus face to his hair above. And that is considered Prayojana Gyan primarily. But again, it is said that the Srimad Bhagavatam has Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana everywhere. But just that primary focus in those group of cantos is that. Like for example, in the introduction to the Srimad Bhagavatam, only in the first 3 verses, first is Sambandha, second is Abhideya, third is Prayojana. Because the first Janmadhya se etonvaya idaratas charte se vigneswara, that verse is Sambandha. It is talking about Krishna's position. It is talking about let me bow down to Krishna, you know, and it is talking about the illusionary energy of the Lord. It is talking about the demigods. It is talking about the connection. Who are you and who is God? Sambandha. The second verse, Dharma Projita Kaitavotra Paramo. It is primarily talking about Abhideya, because it is rejecting Kaitava Dharma. It is basically trying to tell you what Dharma you need to do. Again, please do not look at that Paneer Bhaji. Those looking extremely exciting. Everybody is going to get it. Don't worry. Sarvadva Prabhu has ensured that all of us have Paneer Bhaji today. Okay? So, Haribol. Okay. And for the Prabhuji, is in my house, by the way. So that's why this division is happening currently. You know, because there are 100 devotees today for Prasadam. So all Prabhujis will take in my house and all Matajis and children are going to take here. So that's why the Prasadam transfer process you see going on over here currently. Just give way and don't get distracted with that. It will come. If you are getting too distracted, I'll tell you the whole menu so that you can be peaceful. And everybody has got at least 2 quantities of क्या वो रसगुल्ला क्या है, स्वीट क्या है, रसगुल्ला सैंडविच, और हरे के लिए 2 पीस है. हरी बोल, बताए गौरव प्रेमानंदे, हरी बोल. So the second verse, Dharma Projita Kaitava, as usual, we are doing a very technical topic in the midst of a birthday party. But Sarvadva Prabhu, when he heard the topic, he got upset. He told me that, क्या Prabhuji birthday party बना रहा मेरी लड़की का ऐसा topic लिया आपने. मैं बोला क्या करो, मेरे को और कोई topic सोचता नहीं है. He said, why don't you have games? I said, 100 devotees के साथ game कैसे खेल लेगा? मुश्किल है. Flat खेलते. So you know, we'll do what we are doing. Okay, till 8 o'clock only. Don't worry. So. The Dharma Projita Kaitavotra Paramo, it basically rejecting the Kaitava Dharma. So that is basically the Abhideya, because it's pointing to Abhideya, the process. You know, what process you need to reject and what process you need to accept. The third verse which is there, Nigama Kalpataror Galitam Phalam Sukhamukad Amrita Drava Sanyutam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Murako rasikaha bhuvi bhavukaha. It is basically talking about prayojana because it's talking about rasa. It is talking about bhavukaha. It is talking about all that. So it's basically pointing towards prayojana. So the Srimad Bhagavatam, he says that it is like an ocean which has sambandha, abhideya, prayojana going on constantly in every canto. But primary focus is there of a group of cantos. So the primary focus of the first 5 is sambandha. The primary focus of the next 4 is abhideya. And the primary focus of the last 3 is prayojana. Though everything is there everywhere again. You know? So that is the first thing. So similar, so of course there is another interesting outline that I will maybe save it for the next time. Yeah, so I think I'll take this one now. Okay, so now what we will do is, so this will be more like a kind of, we'll do a little discussion so that everybody participates amidst all this. So basically, V.Shrikanth Thakur, basically he not only says general, first 5 cantos are from lotus feet till waist and all that, but rather he talks about specific things. Like for example, the first canto is basically the soles of the lotus feet of Krishna. Krishna ka jo soles. The second canto is the, the top of the lotus feet of Krishna. Understood? The toes and everything, fingers. Yeah. And the third canto is right from the, the ankle of the feet up till the waist. The fourth canto is the private parts of the Lord and the surroundings area. The fifth canto is the belly. The sixth canto is the heart. The seventh canto is the arms with the fingers. The eighth canto is the hand. The ninth canto is the neck. The 10th is the face till the eyebrows. The 11th is the forehead and the 12th is the hair on the head. But this is general categorization. There is more specific categorization also. Every chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam is mapped to a specific part of the Lord's body with a reasoning. Okay, so I'll start this discussion. So this is a phenomenal discussion. So let us see where we reach. Okay, so okay, very good. He's asking authority because people ask authority. So as I understand, because I have done, I have not read the book honestly. It is a new book which I got, which of course I'm not going to give anybody. Sorry. I'm just reading it since the last 2 days, so I have not read it fully. But whatever I read, I'm talking now. So I have half-hearted knowledge. But primarily, V.Shrikanth Thakur talks about it in terms of which part, and even Prabhupada talks about it. I think all of you know this, right? Prabhupada talks, first canto is the lotus feet of the Lord. Ye to Prabhupada baat karte. V.Shrikanth talks about the details, but the Suhotra Swami, he talks about the finer details. So exactly from where he has researched, I need to find out, but it is exactly in line with what V.Shrikanth Thakur is saying. So V.Shrikanth Thakur has broadly said that the souls is first canto. So the elaboration is there. So anyway, it makes just perfect sense. It's just absolutely fantastic. It's just thrilling. Okay, so let's go into it one by one and then you will understand what we are actually talking. Okay, so let's start with the first canto. The first canto being the soul. The souls of the soul means not S-O-U-L, S-O-L-E-S. कभी-कभी क्या होता है स्पेलिंग में प्रॉब्लम हो जाता है. आजकल माइक्रोसॉफ्ट वर्ड के कारण लोग स्पेलिंग भूल गए, वो स्पेलिंग ऑटो करेक्ट हो जाते हैं ना. So we don't know. So souls means under the feet of the Lord. So you must have seen some places Krishna's lotus feet करके आपने देखा होगा ना, कहीं-कहीं marks रहते हैं उसके ऊपर. So Krishna, both the lotus feet left and right have 19 marks exactly. And the 19 marks correspond to 19 chapters one by one. Yeah, so that's what we are going to see now. Okay. So I will tell you the Haribol, welcome. We are in the middle of a fantastic discussion and Amargor Prabhu has arrived with sweater and muffler and everything. Looks pretty sick actually. So and there are even children excited about the cake and everything that has come. So it's a lot of challenges to speak over here, but try. So, yeah. So as I told you, the soles of the lotus feet of Krishna have 19 symbols. So we will see symbol by symbol and we will connect it to the chapter, understanding why that chapter is that symbol. Okay. So some people are getting extremely excited over here. Okay. We'll start from the first one. So the first one he says is, what is the first chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto? Questions by the sages. Fantastic. So that is compared to the fish. the divine fish on one of the lotus feet of the Lord, it indicates because the fish is very restless. Similarly, he says here that the mind of the sages were very restless because Kali Yuga began and it was full of doubts. So like you have seen fish. Fish is considered the most restless creature. It always moving. So the mind of the peaceful sages were generally peaceful because of Kali Yuga coming. They had several questions and they started asking all these questions. So that is the first chapter of the first canto. Correct? Okay. So first 2-3 I will say. Then onwards I will ask you to philosophically speculate why that mapping is there. I told you Vishwanath Thakur gives broad outlines and there are devotees who have done exact mappings. Broad outlines are given by acharyas. Like Prabhupada says na, soul is the lotus feet. Yeah, it is there. So soul lotus feet. So now we soul mein thoda aur details hai abhi isme. Fantastic. Let's go ahead now. Second chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam is what? Divinity and divine service. Actually in this particular section that I am talking now, there is not much of questions, honestly, because this is more Rasika. So in Rasika and poetry, there is no question. Like in poetry, you don't ask a question. Why? It's a Rasika. It is a mellow which is to be experienced and enjoyed. I'm just making that point very clear because fantastic. So the first is a fish. Second chapter, divinity and divine service, he is comparing it to the moon. Why he compares it to the moon? Because the moon which is there, gives light. The moon gives, the moon's cooling rays are very soothing to the heart, right? We talk about, the scorching rays of the sun and the cooling effect of the moon. All the lovers talk about moon only, at least. I don't remember our own time of Bollywood where they were talking about the glory of the sun. Though the sun is very glorious, they were generally talking about the moon because it gives cooling rays. So similarly, the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is full of the cooling rays because the primary questions of the sages are all answered in the second canto, the divinity and divine service. All beautiful instructions are coming. Shrinvata Swagata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanad Hridayantasto Hyapadrani Vidunoti Sursatam. From that, Nashta Parayasho, so many, entire series. We had once discussed this if you remember. It talks about the 14 stages of bhakti. It's full of cooling effect to the heart. Ekdam first class, heart ko first class bana deta hai. So it is called as the moon of the lotus feet, soul of Krishna. 2-3 I will tell, then onwards I will ask you to think why it is like that. Okay, now onwards I will only ask you. Third chapter of the first canto is titled Krishna is the source of all incarnations. And that is compared to the triangle. There is one triangle also. I mean, there are 19 symbols, you can believe me. Next time when you see that Krishna's lotus feet somewhere, you can count it. 19 in total. Triangle hai. So the triangle is compared to the third chapter. Can you tell me why? Krishna source of incarnations. Philosophically, just try to think from the poetic perspective, try to think. Why do you think the triangle is compared to the third chapter? Yes, go ahead. Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh is one thing, the 3 Gunavataras that it talks about. Something even more fundamental. Go ahead. ईश्वर प्रकृति वो चैप्टर में नहीं आता, वो ट्रायंगल है लेकिन ये चैप्टर में नहीं आता वो. Go ahead. ब्रह्म परमात्मा भगवान है लेकिन ये चैप्टर में नहीं आता, आपको थर्ड चैप्टर पढ़ना पड़ेगा. No, it's okay. Thank you. No, वो तो ये चैप्टर में नहीं आता ना माता जी. मोड ऑफ मटेरियल नेचर, कृष्णा सोर्स ऑफ इनकार्नेशंस, थर्ड चैप्टर फर्स्ट कैंटो. रिमेंबर, इट इज बिकॉज there is one very important verse in that chapter which says that the Lord incarnates in 3 forms: demigods, humans and animals. The Lord's incarnations are demigods like Vamana, Narada. They are all demigod incarnations. Human incarnations like Krishna, Rama. Animal incarnations like Hayagriva, Varaha, Narasimha, etc. Understood? So there are 3 types of incarnations. There is a verse in that. The Lord comes in these 3 basic forms. Then similarly there is the 3 Gunavataras, there are the 3 Purushavasaras, Karanodaksha, Kshirodaksha and this thing. So there are many groups of 3 in that primarily. So that is why triangle goes with that chapter. Okay? So you'll have to think from that poetic perspective. Okay, so let's see poetry. Fantastic. Let's go ahead. The fourth chapter is titled what? Let's remember, because first canto I think everybody has read at least for sure. Fourth chapter क्या है? Title मेरे पास सामने है लेकिन तब भी मुझे याद था वैसे भी. Fourth chapter, first canto, appearance of Sri Narada. Fantastic. I think Sarvasma Prabhu's people are extremely well trained in Srimad Bhagavatam because he himself has read it fully. So, okay, appearance of Sri Narada. That he has compared it to 4 ambrosial pots. So if you see in one of Krishna's lotus feet, there are 4 pots of nectar kept. 4 ambrosial pots. That means the point is, the four ambrosial pots are basically, there to quench the thirst of the conditioned soul. So Vyasa is parched currently after writing all the Vedas. If you see that fourth chapter में क्या होता है? व्यासदेव ने सब वेद लिखा है, अभी पूरा गला सूख गया उनका. Means he is experiencing a parched feeling. Okay, so who comes? Narada comes. With what does he come? With all his instructions, which is compared to what? Those 4 pots of nectar which he has come with to fulfill Vyasa's requirement. Fantastic. The 5th chapter is titled what of the first canto? Narada's instructions on Srimad Bhagavatam. This Narada's instructions on Srimad Bhagavatam, this is compared to the hoof print of a calf. Krishna के एक पीठ पे वो भी एक symbol है. Hoof print of a calf. So why do you think hoof print of a calf और Narada instructions on Bhagavatam का क्या connection है? It's very simple actually. Very good. You can cross over the ocean by following those instructions. Right? Yeah, that's why it's called that. Very good. The 6th chapter is what? Conversation between Narada and Vyasa. In that, what happens in that chapter? Story of Narada boy, how he meets Krishna and all that happens. That is compared to the divine bow. There is a bow also in Krishna's feet. Okay, so the birthday celebration, I think we have to quickly wind up because several devotees have arrived. Mukundanand Prabhu, please come. Let's welcome Mukundanand Prabhu by loudly chanting Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. So, of course, I had asked him to come and speak, but I think he purposely delayed by 1.5 hours. Anyway, so we are in the middle of the discussion. So it compares to the okay. 5th is over. 6th was what compared to the divine bow. So 6th chapter, why is it considered to the divine bow? What is the highlight of that chapter? See, you'll have to go to the highlight. See, please remember, har ek chapter ka ek highlight. Let's revise the whole thing. First chapter was fish because the highlight of the first chapter was the mind of the sages were disturbed like the fish. The 2nd chapter was compared to the moon because the cooling rays of the moon were there, the instructions. The 3rd chapter was a triangle because we are talking about the Lord inventing in 3 main forms: animals, humans and demigods. The 4th was compared to the 4 ambrosial pots because that was the highlight of the chapter. He was quenched, he was parched, and to quench his thirst, Narada arrives with the pots. The 5th is compared to the hoof print of the calf because the instructions can help you cross the material world. The 6th is compared to the bow. What is the highlight of the 6th chapter? Narada story का highlight क्या है? Narada story का highlight क्या है? Srimati Chandra Prabhu there is really rocking us all. He's saying that it is. Yes, he had personal darshan of the Lord. That darshan of the Lord is compared to the arrow of the Lord. And after that, what happens? Narada becomes mad in ecstasy. He's unable to do anything. He's saying that after that I was like crazy. I was looking, where is that Lord gone? So that means with the Lord's bow, when he shoots the arrow at some soul, he's finished. He's just gone mad now in ecstasy. That is why bow. That chapter. Because of highlight hota. Okay. Very good. 7th chapter is what? What 7th chapter ka title kya hai? First canto. Son of Drona punished. Fantastic. That is compared to the conch. Why conch? Victory to the Pandavas. That's it, right? It announces victory to the Pandavas. After all the battle, again, ek aur bada problem ho gaya. Ultimately, Krishna allows the Pandavas to come out victorious even of that situation. So that's why conch. Very good. 8th chapter. Hey, what is the 8th chapter? Prayers of Queen Kunti. Fantastic. So that is compared to the 2 concentric circles. You know concentric circles? Ek circle, bahar ek circle. Why like that? What is the highlight of that chapter? Oh, Queen Kunti ke prayers mein, which section of prayers highlight? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that is one thing. That's very good. What is the, if you see the beginning also, how does it begin with? It talks about, antar bahir avasthitam. It talks about, Krishna being inside, outside. It talks about, Krishna's pastimes in such a way that, Mother Yashoda is, Mother Yashoda situation, Kunti situation. That means it talks about Krishna is all like within and without an expert actor, whose actions are very difficult to understand. That is one essence of his prayer. So that's why 2 concentric circles. Go ahead. Yeah, honestly, I mean, you can think in so many ways because it's a poetic idea. Yeah, perfect. I agree with that. You're so that is the 2 circles. The 9th is what chapter? What is the 9th chapter? Bhishma Dev's departure. So that is actually compared to the octagon. Octagon मालूम है ना सबको? 8-sided figure. Octagon. Why octagon? Octagon because there are 8 directions. If you know from the perspective, there are 8 directions we talk about. There are 4 and there are other 4 also. 45 degree, 8 directions. The point is that Bhishma, by even though he was in such a situation, he desired perfection and he basically achieves. That means the basic point is nothing in the 8 directions is unattainable for Krishna's devotee. Bhishma was in such a tough situation. He was shot, he was lying on the bed of arrows, and ultimately what happens? He wants Krishna to come and Krishna comes and he attains what he wants. He wanted to pass. See, Bhishma's passing away is fantastic because Bhishma's passing away is something which is extremely difficult to obtain. Because first of all, Bhishma passed away when he wanted to. Ichha Mrityu. That's why Haridas Thakur, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, when Haridas Thakur passes away, he remembers the passing of Bhishma. At that time it comes. Because Bhishma's passing was fantastic. In such a situation he passed away. You understood, no? So that means nothing is unattainable for Krishna's devotee. That means all the 8 directions Krishna's devotee can conquer. That's what Bhishma's conquest stands for. That's the marvel of such a personality like Bhishma. Let's go ahead. The 10th chapter is titled what? Departure of Lord Krishna for Dwarka. Okay, and that is compared to 4 sweet blackberries. So in Krishna's feet in one place there are blackberries, 4 sweet blackberries. So that is compared to that, because what is the highlight of that chapter? Anybody remembers the 10th chapter of the first canto? What is the highlight there? What happens primarily there? No, he is not yet arrived in Dwarka. Lord Krishna's departure for Dwarka. Oh, 11th chapter की बात कर रहे हो, arrival. These people feel bad, okay. And then what happens when Krishna starts walking? नहीं परीक्षित तो बहुत पहले था, वो तो 8वें चैप्टर में था. नहीं, that is in the 8th chapter. 10th chapter में Krishna goes away. 8th chapter में Krishna used to stop करते. That's why he stays behind, na? Kunti and all this. 10th chapter he doesn't stay, he walks off. What happens there? If you remember what happens there, Krishna walks through in the 10th chapter of the first canto. Krishna is primarily walking through a large tract of India to reach Dwarka. So that it is described, how all those verses are there. All the hills were giving things, minerals, everything was auspicious by the glance of the Lord. You know that? All the purports of Prabhupada are there. How, on industrial enterprise our success is not there. It is based on the grace of the Lord, the glance of the Lord. Krishna is traveling across Bharata Bhumi. Are you understanding? That is actually that chapter. Krishna is traveling across Bharata Bhumi from Hastinapur until Dwarka. He's walking. As he's walking, he's bringing fortune for everyone. And fortune for everyone where in the land of Bharata, which is a part of Jambu Dvipa. So, when Krishna came to this world, the idea is that all the residents of Jambu Dvipa were benefited, because Krishna for several pastimes even he goes here and there. So, Jambu Dvipa, that is why 4 Jambu fruits. Because 4 Jambu fruits indicating that all the people of Jambu Dvipa are benefited by Krishna's coming. Because when Krishna comes to this world, he walks everywhere. And when he walks everywhere, people in all directions are benefited. That's the idea here. Yeah, Jambu is a blackberry. Jambu fruit. Okay. 11th chapter is what? Krishna's entrance into Dwarka. So that he has compared here to the 4 swastiks. So there are 4 swastiks on Krishna's one of his feet. So I think that's an auspicious thing. So that means all the residents of Dwarka are extremely excited that Krishna has come, and that is standing for that. 12th chapter is what? After this what happens? Birth of Parikshit. And another interesting thing he talks about, just like Chakravarti Path earlier I told you, first 5 cantos are prominently Sambandha, next 4 are Abhideya, and next 3 are Prayojana. Similarly, he says in the first canto, first 5 chapters are prominently Sambandha, 1 to 5. 6 to 9 are prominently Abhideya and 10 to 12 are Prayojanam. So he explains why. He says that the first 5 chapters which are there of the first canto are talking about instructions. If you see mainly. The second chapter is answering all the questions. Narada is confused. And Vyasa is confused. And Narada comes that you should glorify Bhagavatam. So connection is being established. 6th to 9th is talking about Abhideya. Because 6th chapter is talking about, if you see carefully, it is talking about how Narada practiced bhakti. Kaisa bhakti karna chahiye. Narada example. Then if you see in the 7th chapter, how in difficult situations the Pandavas are surrendering to Krishna. Ashwatthama aage ye wo kar raha hai and these people are going to Krishna and following. In difficult situations under Krishna. 8th and 9th chapter are talking about prayers. 8th is talking about prayers of Kunti. Vandanam as an important part of Abhideya. 9th is talking about the time of death, how you focus on Krishna. That is also Abhideya. You see, so first 5 chapters of first canto were Sambandha. Next 4 chapters were Abhideya. And 10, 11, 12 are again Prayojana, because in 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 chapters, the prime focus is Vipralamba Bhava. Because Krishna is going away. Yudhishthira is crying. Pandavas are crying. Residents of Dwarka are also crying that Krishna was not there for a long time. They are experiencing Sambhoga, Krishna coming back. Then in the 13th chapter, 14th chapter, Krishna departs from the world. Again Pandavas are crying. So the whole thing is Prayojana, because it's all experience of Vipralamba, separation. So he talks about how at a global level Bhagavatam has 5 cantos, 4 cantos, 3 cantos, and even within the first canto, the same thing is there of Sambandha. I mean, this is in connection with what I was telling earlier. You understood? That poetic classification. Okay, fine. So now we go on. प्रभु जी और 15 मिनट में आपका केक वेक आ गया क्या सब केक वेक? Everything is ready. Okay, fine. You are only waiting for me to finish. Okay, very good. Don't worry. I'll finish very soon. Sorry for. Okay, 12th chapter is what? Birth of Emperor Parikshit. So that he compares to a thunderbolt. Why thunderbolt? Why thunderbolt? Very simple. Tell me why thunderbolt? Perfect. Because Parikshit was like Indra. That kind of personality. He was very powerful and he was like a thunderbolt who had appeared. Who was now going to do some very severe action. Very good. 13th chapter is what? Dhritarashtra quits home. That is compared to what? Umbrella. Why umbrella? Very simple. Why umbrella? Shelter. Oh, Dhritarashtra is experiencing shelter from Vidura. Vidura is coming and basically he's giving him shelter. Of course, he's giving a strong shelter, but shelter only, na? Strong words he's speaking and take him out of the house. Come on, get out, he's saying. So it's compared to the umbrella. The 14th is called disappearance of Lord Krishna. That is compared to the flag. Why flag? Why flag? Why Krishna's disappearance is considered a flag? Exactly. Okay. Another time. Sorry. चल रहा है हमारा थोड़ा और 10 मिनट. Why flag? Flag because Krishna's mission was successful. He came to this world for 125 years and he's going back. He had done everything whatever he wanted to. It's a success. It's a victory. His advent was successful, right? Did he go back without accomplishing what he wanted to? No, everything was accomplished. He wanted to, whatever he wanted to do was done. Victory flag at the end. 15th chapter is Pandavas retire timely. That is compared to what? Guiding stick. Krishna ke ek lotus feet pe guiding stick bhi hai. So why stick? Why is that chapter? What is the essence of that chapter? Pandavas retire timely ka essence kya hai? Kya ho raha hai wo chapter mein? See, when Arjuna comes and he tells Yudhishthira, they initially cry and all that, and then what do? There is one very crucial thing. In that lamentation, where do they seek shelter? The Pandavas. That's a very crucial part of that chapter, 15th chapter. Krishna's instructions. So it looks like Sri Chandra Prabhu has, really, yeah, correct. Krishna's instructions. It comes, right? Arjuna says that now it is a time for us to reflect on the same instructions of the Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna's instructions. So Krishna's instruction become the guiding stick in times of crisis. 16th chapter is what? How Parikshit received the age of Kali. Of course, please remember here, Kali comes only at the end. The focus of that chapter actually is, what? Parikshit, wherever he is going, everybody is glorifying Pandavas. You remember that? That is the whole thing. Wherever he is going, everybody is saying how fortunate you are and all that. So that is compared to the lotus flower. There is a lotus flower on Krishna's feet. Because there the glories of the Pandavas are being described to Kali. Means not to Kali, sorry, to Parikshit. At the end only Kali comes. 17th chapter is what? Punishment for Kali, correct? That is compared to the wheel. That is very easy to understand. Why wheel? Wheel because punishment. So there is a wheel. That's compared to punishment. 18th chapter is, you know what? Parikshit cursed by a Brahmana boy. That is compared to the lifeline. Krishna's lotus feet, there is one symbol which is lifeline. Or line or lifeline rehte hai, line. Just like on our hand we have lifeline, on the foot also there is a lifeline. So that why lifeline? Parikshit cursed by Brahmana boy. Why lifeline? Die in 7 days. Lifeline. Life is at risk now. Die in 7 days. Lifeline. Right? The essence of the chapter is what? He's being cursed. His life is going to terminate now. So that's why lifeline. Okay, the 19th one is what? Appearance of Shukadeva Goswami. That's compared to the grain of barley. Now please note this barley, na, I mean even in real terms, it's considered one of the most valuable grains actually. Even in any this thing, you know, it's considered very healthy. Unfortunately, today you don't get barley only. If you go down and ask, you don't get barley. All barley used for liquor. That is modern time. You don't get barley. Seriously, barley. I don't even know what to call that in Hindi, Marathi. Okay, barley kya bolte? You don't get it easily. You go around and find barley, you don't get it because it's all used for liquor. But it's considered the best. It's considered best for health. But you don't get it easily because they are all using it for that. Medical shops, you get small packet, you get pouch of barley, you get. There are also some medical shops only you get. It's considered very good for health. But unfortunately, people don't eat it. So barley, because that grain basically sustains life. So Parikshit's whole life was now at risk. He was going to die. But Shukadeva Goswami was coming to give him life. And Annat Prana Jayate. That means from Anna comes Prana basically. And that grain of barley, which is the best Anna. That means among all Anna, barley Anna is considered the best. That's what. And that is a real fact. Please remember. Barley is considered the best grain. Which is actually there from health perspective and everything. Though we don't get it because it's all used for liquor today. You don't get it. It's being done. People are harvesting barley. But they're using it for a different purpose. You don't get it easily. But it's considered the best grain. Because it's the king of grains, that grain has been placed over there to show that that grain gives life. And now in the time of crisis of Parikshit Maharaj, who has arrived? Shukadeva Goswami has arrived with life. And that life is the life of Bhagavatam. Okay. So this is the first 19 chapters. And this is how the 19 chapters map to the in the soul of the lotus feet of Krishna to all the symbols with justification. Okay. Like this, the entire Bhagavatam is mapped to every single thing. Why this finger, this chapter? Why this finger, this chapter? Why this eyebrow, this chapter? Like that it is there. Okay. So there are many wonderful things to see. We'll continue next time because I think now it is like I'll end early a little bit.
First 5 are Sambandha, 6 and 9 are Vidya, and 10 and 11 are Prayojan.
Yeah.
He does not mention anything about 13 to 19.
No. He says that then onwards the mood is Prayojan only because the mood is a sad mood of Vipralambha only. Because what happens is, see, he says that first Krishna departs, Pandavas depart, Parikshit briefly meets Kali, then Parikshit is cursed. Full chapters are separation and only separation. And separation is Vipralambha, that is connected to Prayojan only, in that sense. That's the ultimate goal of it. Okay, so we'll continue the poetic narration next time. Obviously, so we'll end now. Sarvatma Prabhu, wherever he is to... Oh, there is no question over here because I had... Anybody has any comment on this part? The second part, not the first part. First part ho gaya TattvaSandarbha discussion. I'm talking about the second part. Any comment? It's fine, right? So we'll continue the discussion. Actually, 6th canto is beautiful. I mean, I'll just give you a clue because I'm unable to resist it. Sarvatma Prabhu is yet to arrive. 6th canto, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur maps it to the heart of Krishna. Because 6th canto is the heart, because Ajamil undergoes such a position and Vishnu does deliver him. So that's his heart. Chitraketu undergoes such a position and he is delivered. Vritrasur undergoes such a position, he is delivered. So it's like, the whole thing is deliverance, abhidheya, process, as compared to the heart of the Lord. And moreover, Chakravarti Pati says, because it is the heart of Krishna, the heart of Krishna is analogous to the lotus feet of Radharani. Because lotus feet of Radharani is always on the heart of Krishna. So that is why the 19 symbols on the lotus, Radharani ke lotus feet pe 18 symbols hai. The 18 symbols on the lotus feet of Radharani correspond to the 18 chapters of the 6th canto. Do mapping hai. ये सब हम बाद में करेंगे पोइट्रिक डिस्कशन. ओके. हरे कृष्ण. चलो क्वेश्चन है इनका. Moon, yes. Yeah, soothing to everything. Body, soul. In this context, the soul. Pots. See, Vyasa was thirsty. He wrote all Puranas, Shastra, and he's feeling very bad. I mean, पूरा खाली लग रहा है, you know. कुछ भी नहीं है. अरे बाबा, that soothing effect in that, it doesn't go to Vyasa, na? That soothing effect to you and me, na? Of course, Vyasa only wrote it. See, you have to see from that chapter perspective. Come on, you can't look at it. वो chapter में क्या हो रहा है? Vyasdev is parched, na? Correct, na? So who is coming with nectar? Narada is coming with nectar. Appearance of Narada Muni. Narada आ गया ना nectar के साथ. उनका प्यास बुझाने के लिए. वही है बस. हाँ? वो कृष्णा के लोटस फीट पे है. वो कृष्णा को जाके पूछो आप जब जाओगे तो. मुझे मत पूछो, मुझे बस है. लेकिन कृष्णा के ये have you seen sometimes Vrindavan and many shops they display lotus feet of Krishna, lotus feet of Radharani, lotus hand of Krishna. वो 8th canto lotus hand, it's fantastic. Lotus hand में ना every symbol is mapped to every chapter. It is beautiful. Like I'll just tell you one for example. ये lifeline है ना, lifeline is mapped to the 2nd chapter, King Gajendra's crisis. Because उसका life जा रहा था ना, so that is the lifeline. So like this line, Bhagya line, the Saubhagya line, everything is compared to one chapter with reason. We will see all this next time. Yeah. आओगे नहीं ना? मेरे को मीटिंग के लिए लोग अट्रैक्ट करने के लिए कुछ चाहिए, इसलिए रखा है मैंने, और कुछ नहीं. मैं सब कवर करने के बाद आपको बता दूंगा ताकि आप बाद में पढ़ लो.